All right. All right. Shalom. This is the book of Luke chapter 13. And I'm going to read verse 7. It says, Then said he unto the dresser of his vineyard, Behold, these 3 years I come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and find none. Cut it down. Why cumbereth it the ground? Yeah, so this is going to be another lesson. And the topic at hand is the Lord's plants, his trees, the various things that the Lord likens men unto, laboring men, ultimately those of the nation of Israel, the true Israel of God. So the elect, the hopeful elect men, starting with the men that are preaching, teaching, and ultimately been put into the service of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, to war as a soldier for him, push the truth, be in season, out of season, and continue, in effect, being an example here on this earth of what light is. The light according to the true doctrine of these scriptures. So before getting all the way into this, as always, all honor, glory, and praise be to Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai Waharakak Wadash. Shalom to you brothers that I labor with over here, personally, on a daily. Shalom, starting, with the men, the elders, the elder men over there at the Great Millstone Church, to the men on down, following and teaching the true doctrine of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Peace, and much, love through the spirit. And as always, like to say, continue, endure in these works because they're much needed for our nation. So getting back to, the scriptures where I kicked it off at, which is Luke chapter 13 and 7. I'm going to read it again, but then, I'm going to hop up so we can get the context. Luke chapter 13 and 7 says, Then said he unto the dresser of his vineyard, Behold, these 3 years I come seeking fruit on this fig tree. So the Lord, when he set forth a tree up that's supposed to bring forth fruit, supposed to bear something, right? Have a gain, have an increase. The Lord is expecting to see, those fruits be shown. And the fruits in reality are, things that the Lord has deemed good, that he has set men forth to do according to the lot he has given each man. We have teachers, we have helps, we got, it's all types of positions in the church. There's all types of lots. You can read in the book in the Corinthians. I forget the chapter right now, but the Lord, laid forth many lots that men are to serve within, ultimately to serve the Lord and to shoot forth his goodness, right? And it's all according to the measure you've been given, so you can fulfill, the will of the Heavenly Father. Again, as always, this message is out to you Israelites, us so-called black people, as we're called or known as today. The Lord has set certain of us forward, set us up and forward to, again, be a representation of him here on this earth. And those of us who have truly come into this this walk, this path, the straight gate, the straight and narrow, all right, the way unto life, which is ultimately following in the steps that Yahweh Shai has laid forth through these scriptures, understanding the word, being wise and actually doing accordingly. We know what it is that we are required to do, especially those of you laboring amongst other men who are fortified in doing so and are teaching you correctly, So, and that's regardless of where you are at in the current. If you, fell off the path and you're elsewhere today, at one point you knew. And we understand, according to the scriptures, a man, when they, fall, out the way, they don't even know they're out the way. You walking in darkness, you on the path of mischief, but ultimately it's because you wasn't bringing forth, and that's what we will get into. So, not to make this any longer than it needs to be, I'm gonna kick it off in the book here, Luke chapter 13. We're gonna hop up to verse 6. It's the beginning of the parable. It says, he spake also this parable, that he being Yahweh Shai, he's one of the one speaking here. It says, a certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard. So it's a certain fig tree. And let's get this real quick. Mark chapter 8 and verse 24, it says, and he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking, right? So when we read these scriptures, we're likening it to various things, all right? Parabolically, poetically, if you will. And the tree is often used to describe men and their actions and how they go about things, traits and characteristics about them. We can come here real quick in the book of Matthew, chapter 7, and let's see. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 16, it says, ye shall know them by their fruits, right? So men are identified or known by their fruits, because he's not talking about a tree here. He's not walking around identifying the apple tree and the orange tree. He's talking about men and the traits that they have, their path, the way they walk, things to be realized. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Things you should be realizing and noticing, And no, men don't try to gather grapes out of the thorns, because it'll poke you. So those certain men that you need to avoid. Or figs of thistles. You're not trying to get a fig if it's, pretty much in a place that's going to cut you, We want to gather the fruit that's bared, openly and freely without any hurt or hassle. Matthew chapter 7, 16, we will read in the NLT. It says you can identify them by their fruit. That is, by the way they act. So a tree ain't really putting forth any other actions. So it's talking about men. It says, can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? And I finish it off here, Matthew 7 and 17. It says, even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. Right? So just to make it clear, the Lord, he's not sitting there having an ongoing conversation about, trees growing out the ground, but ultimately men and their actions. So this is what this is about. So, Lord willing, the point is made, and I can get even more clear scriptures, but I want to keep this brief. So back to Luke chapter 13 and 6, he spake also this parable. So the Lord speaking parabolically, meaning he's using certain symbolism to actually speak about a real topic, and his real topic is what? Men, being likened to trees here. It says, a certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came and sought fruit thereon and found none. So it's trees that are out here that are supposed to be bringing forth fruit. Thus men that are supposed to be bringing forth good works, according to the measure, according to the light, and according to, what the Lord has given them. And that's simply what we're supposed to do. We bring forth the word, we hope, we give, we uphold, we endure, we be examples of the Lord's light. And ultimately we continue in that path. That's us bringing forth, and there's many things you can do. I'm just not being detailed completely right now, but our job isn't all that drawn out. It's not hard to go out, open your mouth, speak to Israel. And I'm, quoting, my brother Pada, because that's something that, I try to keep in the forefront of my mind. It's nothing for us to speak to our nation. It's not too much. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not really willing to do anything too much more. Being brotherly, helping when needed, just truly being there. And there's so much more. Living and actually becoming better. That's bringing forth fruit. But when you're not doing certain things, you also, it's clear to see other things deteriorate. And that's when you truly paying attention to men, their actions, especially men who proclaim to be, in the truth and walking amongst other men. You know when a tree go bad and stop bringing forth fruit, it becomes very clear. But Luke chapter 13 and 7 will continue. Matter of fact, I'm going to read 6 again. It says, he spake also this parable. A certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came and sought fruit thereon, and found none. Verse 7, then said he unto the dresser of his vineyard. And this dresser could be likened to, certain men who've been set up to lead, to watch over men, just to see and keep, things in line, because it's men who have been set up through the Spirit, through the Lord, to guide men and to help them, stay the path, because every spirit is different and needs different attendance to. But that's just how things been set up. We learned this truth because the elders, learned the truth, and they went out and did what they did and made this truth, accessible. So there's no men that can't say those elders over at the Great Millstone Church haven't been used to bring forth good works. And ultimately, there's no men out here teaching, the true doctrine of the scriptures, or, trying to mirror it in a ways, hit the highways, do breakdown. That's not mirroring those men. So it's just a lot of stuff going on. But my point is, men have been set up above other men to help guide. And that's could be likened to what this dresser is. Then said he unto the dresser of his vineyard, behold, these 3 years I come seeking fruit on this fig tree and found none. Yeah, because it's men who get slothful. They go out the way, they stick around, and ultimately they just not bring it forth. And it's apparent. They'll go on and just, continue to wax worse and worse, right? Continue, it says, cut it down. Why cumber it the ground? Because that's how the Lord works. He like, if this tree not bringing forth, get rid of it. It's taking up space. It don't need to be around. It's taking up space. And ultimately, I'm coming here taking my time trying to pluck something off of it, and it's not bringing forth. So what's the point of it being around? Because the Lord, he requires what he expects, and it's that simple. But he told you his burden was light. So keep it simple and do what you ought to do, or you ultimately be cast out. But men are merciful, and the Lord is merciful. Luke chapter 13 and 8, it says, and he answering said unto him, this the dresser of the vineyard, he says, Lord, let it alone this year also. So men being merciful, giving men time, because we understand that this path, it takes time to be built up. It takes time to be learned, but at the end of the day, someone who's truly not going to kick it in gear, they just never will, and it's a sad thing, but it's something that's truly, available and, more easy to see when you, consider, but again, it's a sad case at the end of the day. But the Lord requires what he requires, and we believe that, and we align with that. It says, and find none. It says, it's like Luke 13 and 8. It says, and he answered and said unto him, Lord, let it alone this year also, till I shall dig about it and dung it, thus giving it more attention, putting more effort into this tree, allowing it to grow, giving it time to grow. Again, this tree is a person, it's a man. So it's men who allow men, try to allow men to get it, get things going, because we know this life, we got to keep a balance, we got certain things going on, work, jobs, but at the end of the day, the Lord said, he who don't, lay down his life for me is not worthy of me. And that's laying down family, women, jobs, so on and so forth. When you see those things not happening, that means the man's not willing to truly serve the Lord, because he's caught up with the, affairs of life. When you go back to the Matthew 13, and that's beautiful because it says the sower went out to sow. Those seeds was planted. What do you think those seeds would grow to be? Different plants, trees, if you will, but if that ground isn't, in the position and condition they need to be. That's the ground, be in our minds. Because that chapter's talking about men having different mindsets, different, types of grounds. Some able to have a seed planted and it grows, and some just, they don't have that capability. But continuing, Luke 13:8 again, and he answered and said unto him, Lord, let it alone this year also till I shall dig about it and dung it. So yeah, get his man a little bit more time, allow it to grow, see what happens. And the ultimatum is in verse 9. It says, and if it bear fruit, well, so if it goes forth and actually bear fruit, that's good. I give it time. I'm considerate, because men are considerate. They should be. But it gets to a point where it's like, you know what? They got to do what it's supposed to do. If not, it has to be put out. And that's, decision making, and, it's shown through the Lord. And it's always correct. The Spirit of the Lord allows these things to be discerned and approved in the manner it ought to be. Continue in Luke 13 and 9. And if it bear fruit, well. And if not, then after that, thou shalt cut it down. And that's how the Lord works. The Lord is merciful. He allows us to fall, but he expects and requires us to get up from falls. The Lord allows us to, have the time to figure it out. But if you're not going to be useful, you're not going to be useful. And that's nothing to the Lord. There's nothing to the Lord to cast a man out, because he's able to, bring in another man that's willing. So, it's all spiritual. Certain things happening, and, we watching, growing. And when I read this scripture, well, actually when it came to mind through the Spirit, I was just like, yeah, Lord willing, I could do a lesson on it, and it could be something edifying and good for our nation here, especially for brothers who go through this and understand it and have seen it. So the Lord requires exactly what he expects. If he sets you forth, as a tree to be bearing fruit, you better bear fruit. The Lord's giving you talents, you better flip those talents. You don't take your money and hide it, go bury it, and run away from the responsibility, and go every which way, be, tossed to and fro. You're supposed to have a sound mind, come into the truth, learn it, put yourself in a position to be useful according to the ability that you've been given, and keep it simple. Fight the good fight, enduring to the end. But with that, I'm just gonna say, Lord willing, this was useful, edifying, strengthening, admonishing, comforting also. So that's it. Till next time, I'll say Shalom.